Hello, gentle viewers. This is Indian, welcoming you to a new episode of Out of the Park Baseball, the tutorial series. Now, previously, I had actually intended to stop the tutorial where we had, but a couple of people, namely Kevin Munoz and Head Opener, asked about some additional aspects of the game, and I thought that these deserve full-length tutorial videos. Another thing we might do down the road is if there's a quick question you guys have, I can't answer it in a YouTube comment, but I could in a video, I might have like a 5 or 10 minute quick hit. But that'll be something to talk about. So instead of concluding the tutorial series on Tuesday, as I planned, we're going to do 2 more videos. This video is going to talk about some of the financial stuff. We're going to talk about drafts, we're going to talk about contracts, we're going to talk about arbitration, and we're going to talk about the Rule 5 draft. In order to do that, I'm going to need to sim through the game to get us to the Rule 5 draft. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell the AI to just run everything for us. Those of you who have been with the channel for quite a while and have seen a lot of my videos might remember my first series with OOTP 17. And I played it for 20 years, and I got fired a couple of times. People got to vote, I picked new teams. I got entirely lucky. I was like, I wonder where I'm at. And here I am at the first year player draft. So I chose the Cleveland Indians for a very important reason, because they have a really good draft pick. Just as a quick little reminder, a trip down memory lane, if you will. So we've been managing for 20 years. We won 3 World Series. We got fired by Cleveland, fired by Atlanta, and now we're back with Cleveland during the draft. So, now if you're a real baseball insider, you know the name of the first year player draft, which is the Rule 4 draft. Rule 5 draft we'll talk about a bit later. But the Rule 4 draft is every player who's either graduated high school or once you've graduated high school, I believe you can declare for the draft at any time during your college career. But the vast majority of players will stay at least until they're a junior in college. Every baseball player in America is eligible for the draft. The modern draft runs for 40 rounds. In the past, it ran a whole lot longer. In fact, those of you who are New York Mets fans might know that Mike Piazza was drafted in the 62nd round. And he ended up being a Baseball Hall of Famer. So, draft round doesn't matter a whole lot, except for the fact that the first round is where you'll get most of your impact talent. Okay. So, what do we need to know about the draft? Draft picks are slotted based on inverse finish in the previous season, but there's a couple of extra wrinkles that were added by the most recent CBA, which I believe was signed in 2012. Namely, the idea of compensation picks, which means that if I have a free agent and I make what's called a qualifying offer, and we'll talk about qualifying offers a little bit later on, other teams can get your draft picks. And those picks will come in what's called the supplemental round, which is between rounds 1 and 2. So we take a quick look here. Here's a supplemental round. You'll notice the Dodgers have 3 picks in this round. Other than that, we consistently have the 2nd or the 4th pick. You can, if you are so inclined, enable draft pick trading. They do it in the NFL, they do it in the NBA, they do it in the NHL, but they don't do it in baseball. There's reasons for it, and they're not that important to us. They just aren't. If you're wondering why 31 picks, because remember, we have the Columbus Miners, who are an expansion team. So, how do you draft? The first step is to figure out what does my team need. And a great way to do that is to look at your minor leagues and start sorting by potential. You need to find out what your team has and what your team needs. Some types of players are always valuable. And so it can be able to go best player available. Right now, just from this quick overview, and all I did was sort each column by potential, We don't have impact prospects. Jorge Mendoza might be one of them. Probably deserves a look. But again, we're not talking about player evaluation. This is strictly just a quick overview. What does this team have and what does it need? And right now, it needs basically prospects at any position. We've got... I consider any prospect to be elite, or at least really high potential, if they have 50 or over in their potential rating. Anyone below 50 could still be helpful, but they're probably flawed in some way. Like, if we look at Josh Simmons here, Josh Simmons has pretty bad control, and his stamina's not great. Which means, even though he's a 46, and that could be a possible all-star, he might not make it, and a lot of things have to go right for him to develop the way we expect. Whereas somebody more like, say, Jorge Mendoza is much closer to a can't miss just because of his offensive profile. It looks like he's never gotten a shot in the majors, but that's probably a mistake. And I would give him, if we were going to spend time playing this season for any length of time, I would definitely promote him. Unless the Indians, of course, have a first baseman that is already really good. And they have Mike Montgomery. He's certainly nothing that exciting. I don't think any of my draft picks are... They still kept Kevin Maitan. Man, he was getting bad when I got fired. Oh, no, he was in Atlanta and he came to Cleveland. Okay, so... we take a quick look at the overall team, and then we decide what do we want to target. So if we look... looking purely at potential... We've got 2 potential cornerstones in Flores and Fuqua. And then we've got some solid contributors, and the rest of the team is pretty average. This is not a very good team. And so this is our chance to fix that. So let's take a look. We're the 4th overall pick. And unless you're playing in historical modes or one of the modes where you can predict the draft classes, a top 5 pick is not something to sneeze on. It's a possible all-time pick. And you can see right away there's 2 80s. There's a whole bunch of talent in this draft. And this is just the batters. If we go to all players, we've got even more quality. So first, we're going to go and we're going to auto-draft until next pick by Cleveland. Because we need to know who will be available. One of the 80s is still left. So, a player with a potential rating of 80 should be a potential megastar. Not every player reaches their potential, of course. And don't forget that everything is adjusted by your scout. Unless you play with 100% scouting on. So if we change to OOTP, Mike Cumby might not look so good. You'll notice he's not an 80 at all. And I bet if we look at catchers, we don't even see Mike Cumby's name. So, whenever there's a huge discrepancy like this between the scouting association, which is normally not very good, and what your scout says, this is something to explore, and it means this is much less of a sure thing. Our guy thinks he's an 80. They think he's going to develop 70 power, 60 discipline, 65 home run power, but he still spots a couple of warning flags. A really low contact, and he's going to strike out quite a bit. If we switch here to OSA ratings, OSA basically thinks he's not going to develop the discipline, a little bit better at average, but without that play discipline and the extraordinary power, they don't think he's worth it. And so this is one of the difficult decisions you need to make. Do you trust your scout, or do you trust your OSA? One thing that rarely changes is this, personality. When you're drafting players, this can be a deal breaker for you, or it should be. You need to see what their personality is like. Here, he's loyal, which means he's likely to stay with the team for less money. And he's got a good work ethic, which means he's more likely to develop. If this scout's estimation of his ceiling is correct, Mike Cumby is going to do his best to achieve it. And that's what a high work ethic means. And there's other personality traits, too, that matter. But these are the main ones you want to consider when drafting. Work ethic is really good. Intelligence is really good. but that's not as easy to find. So, okay. Baby Cumbie is flawed. There's such a wide range in scouting that we can't automatically assume Cumbie is the right guy. So, and again, I'm not going to go through this entire draft. I'm just going to show you some of the things that enter my thought process and how the draft itself actually works. So let's look at someone like Kevin Moran. Now, one of the other important things to keep in mind is whether a player is a high school or college player, denoted by this asterisk. If it's a star, it means he was a high school player. High school players typically have much higher ceilings but much lower floors. This is part of what accounts for this wide discrepancy. OSA thinks he's a scrub, and we think he's amazing. High school players always have a big element of risk because they could always get hurt. They could always get hurt. And so you'll see a little bit more variation. For a team like the Indians that are struggling, taking a risk on high school players is not a bad call. Not a bad call at all. Because you need that extra element of he could be so special that he's amazing. I do not agree with this potential rating, by the way. I think our particular scout is too heavily emphasizing power and discipline. I think he'd be a very, very good player, but he's not a 4th overall pick because his contact is so low. If his contact was a little bit higher, I'd have a lot more faith in him. 35 is not going to cut it. It doesn't matter if a guy can hit a home run if he only hits 225 during the season. He's a decent catcher, too, and this adds to his value. He could be a very good player, but I'm not going to take him. He's also only got 1 year high school stats. And high school stats are, crap anyway. They don't really help you figure out anything. I mean, no one hits 425 in the majors anymore. And we see his competition levels average. All of these things together suggesting Mike Cumbie is probably not our pick. We do need top-level pitching talent, so maybe Kevin Moran is our solution. Again, we begin. Okay, there's a lot more consensus. There's a lot more consensus. Now, number 1, look at this stuff potential. Look at the movement. Look at the control. His control is marginal on the good side. He's got 3 pitches, 2 of which are already plus pitches in the majors. His stamina is not perfect, but he throws super freaking hard. If we look at OSA basically loves him even more. OSA thinks he's got an even higher ceiling to his stuff and his control. This is the kind of player. There's so much in his favor that you would be very, very silly not to take him. Every team needs aces. This guy could be an ace. It all depends on the control and how much you trust your scout. But even if the control doesn't develop, all the other tools are so good, he's going to be amazing. He's going to be amazing. And the only dispute is how amazing he's going to be. He also played at in New Orleans. This is a much better competition level, so his stats are probably more legit. If I were drafting this team, and for the second I am, this is the guy I'm taking. One additional bonus, he's already 21. Which means you put him in full season A, because that's his next big challenge. If he aces A ball, he could be in the majors much more quickly. So I would draft Kevin Moran. This is an easy choice for me. The only other possibility might be Amari McDay. And he'd have to be a special all-time offensive talent. And he's just really good overall. And OSA thinks a little bit less of him. We're going to take Moran. And I don't hesitate to make that. So we advance a little bit. And right away, one thing should immediately leap at your head. Leap at the top, leap out at you. Look who's still there. Cumbie. As a first-round draft pick, Cumbie was a bad choice. As a second-round draft pick, he gets a lot more interesting. We've already got a potential all-time ace. And Mike Cumbie could be a steal in the second round. And again, a lot of this is purely feel and what you value in your players. because Cumby is a catcher, and because he's rated to be pretty decent at it, I mean, it looks like he hasn't played a lot of catcher in high school, so it'll take him some time to develop those catching skills. If he does, even if he only hits 220 or 230, he'll still be a plus WAR player. And there's always a chance they're wrong about his contact. Because it's the second round, because it's less important that we hit on this particular pick, I'm going to take Cumby. And it's a lot cheaper, too. Don't forget, you have to pay draft bonuses. And this can be an important factor if your team is in the red, and is losing money. I'll take Cumby. We'll look at a couple more, and then we'll go from there. Okay. We've got 2 players still above 70. Let's take a look at them. Luis Herrera is basically a very good starter. But look at this. We've got another high-risk player. We think he's going to strike people out. He's going to throw enough strikes to keep people honest. And he's going to have amazing secondary pitches. They don't think it's going to happen. They don't think he's going to hit the stuff margin. They think he'll hit the control, but not the stuff. Our head scout thinks he'll have movement. The scout thinks he doesn't. Not to mention his signability is impossible. This does not mean you cannot sign him. It means if you try to sign him, he's going to want lots of money. Lots and lots and lots of money. 2 other warning flags with Herrera. Number 1, he's played at high school, but only an average competition. And you'll notice he didn't start. This is, roughly speaking, about 6 innings a start. And ideally, you want a lot more innings pitched before you make a decision. It is only a 3rd-round draft pick. And if you don't sign any of your top 3 draft picks, they go back, they don't get drafted, and you get compensation picks. That's another way you can get supplemental picks, is if you don't sign. Actually, you get a proper pick in the proper round. You don't get a supplemental pick if that happens. But it is 1 pick worse. So we would get the 5th overall pick in the 3rd round. Herrera doesn't do it for me. There's too much wildness there. Now, Juan Resto is based very heavily on his defense. And look at all these warning flags. He's not worth it. He's not a very good leader. He doesn't have much work ethic, and he's not very smart. Altogether, this means his chances of reaching even this level of talent, which is not nearly as impressive as it looks, is pretty low. And OSA thinks he's actually a worse defender than he appears to be. Not a good risk. We'll take a look at a couple other players. Because, again, this is purely for demonstration purposes. I'm not going to play any farther with this, I don't think. We've got Arturo Montemayor. Again, marginal hitter. Really good third baseman. Much better defensive player. OSA thinks he's garbage. OSA thinks he'll never hit. Again, very risky. Jim Case. Again, we keep saying the same type of player, and we keep getting disagreements. And this is why you have to decide, is the position important enough that it's worth taking the risk? If it's not, why not? I am thinking, in this case, I would take Jim Case. Because he's such a potentially good infielder, and OSA thinks he's an even better infielder than we do, that this bat could work. And again, he's super young, and it's going to take him a while. His work ethic is good, his leadership not so much, but his greed is low. And this is actually very good. You'll notice if it tells you it's green. Low greed is good. It means he'll take less money. So we would take Jim Case. Although Montemayor is an even better defender. But he's got bad work ethic. We'll take Jim Case. And we draft him. The other way you can set up your draft is by finding things that you really, really, really want. A good contact potential. Players that can hit for average are very rare in the modern game. And so someone like a Tim Lee is worth a risk. This is actually a very good top. This is actually a top quality profile, but he doesn't look like it. Because our scout looks at his potential, and I bet there's one number that he's staring at that means this guy's crap. That number right there. I wonder if OSA likes him. OSA thinks he's even worse. This is a very good defending shortstop who's going to hit for contact, hit some doubles, take some walks, and not strike out much. Literally the only warning sign in his profile is this plate discipline. This is a no-brainer. I don't know why you would not take a guy like Tim Lee. I would completely ignore the potential at this point. If he develops like this, he's an all-star. He's such a good defender that he'll guaranteed justify the bat. The bat could still be pretty useful even if he doesn't hit for much home run power. I don't know why he's being ranked that low, but this is a potential steal. Oh, it also would help if we are actually eligible to pick, and we are, so then we take Tim Lee. So again, anything you think your team needs, sort by that when you get into the later rounds. Because missing on the pick is going to cost you less. But Jared Bunnell is obviously a fantastic offensive prospect, a brilliant third baseman. So why isn't he being signed? You might ask yourself. That word right there. This is why, if you're very, very clever, and by the way, he could even move him to second base and probably be even better. If you're very clever and you spend your early round bonuses very well, you can dive in, go into the backlog, go into the pocketbook to get some extra cash. He is so good, I would draft him anyway. The important thing to keep in mind with baseball in particular, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day how many shortstops you have in your system, because you can always trade them. You never know when an injury will happen. So you almost never want to get hung up on positions. If you have a draft, and this draft has 10 outstanding third basemen, and you grab 4 of them, you've had an amazing draft. Maybe you move people to other positions. Maybe you trade them. Or maybe you hang on to them, and there's an injury, and they get promoted, and they play amazingly. So I hope this little look at the draft really helped you out a bit. We're going to talk, now we're going to talk a little bit about contracts, and then we'll talk about end of the year off-season financial stuff, which will include the Rule 5 draft. Let's take a quick look at our contract. Who on the Indians is super good and his contract is almost up? Kevin Harris, no. Seagrass, okay. Seagrass is actually a borderline starter. I don't know why he's acting as a closer. He's a really good pitcher. He should not be a closer right now. He should be a starter. He's got every starter box ticked except for the third pitch. So I guess maybe that's one thing. So let's talk to him just so I can show you how the contracts work. Now, until the reserve clause, actually I think a little bit before the reserve clause ended, so I think in like the 40s and 50s eventually they added guaranteed contracts. Before that, there were non-guaranteed contracts. You got paid for play. In modern baseball, all contracts are guaranteed. If Chris Seagrass, I don't know who he is, I suspect he's fake because it's already 2036. If there's a real person watching this video named Chris Seagrass, I do not mean you ill. If he got hit by a bus tomorrow, his heirs would earn every cent of this. Except for like the incentive-based stuff. And they wouldn't get the player option because, not to be morbid, but if you're dead, you can't exercise an option. So they'd only get the first 4 years. But you get every cent of that. Now, many baseball teams will take insurance policies out. But you're guaranteed this money. You will get this whether you play every game and play fantastically, you play every game badly, until you retire. If you retire, you miss out on your contract. So that's how that works. you'll notice we're not even getting the option to offer a non-major league contract. When a player gets to a certain age, they don't take minor league deals anymore. This guy's already 34. Okay. So one of the first things you need to do when you're setting up your contracts is you need to look at the number of years. The most important number to decide how many years it will take is this one right here. Now, an older player you don't typically want for a longer term deal. I hope that makes sense. You don't want to overpay for a player's decline. You'd rather pay top dollar for premium talent and then let them go early. Branch Rickey, a very famous general manager of the Cardinals and the Brooklyn Dodgers, once said it's better to let a player go a year early than a year late. This is especially true with contracts. Because every baseball contract is guaranteed, you get no relief from the salary unless you trade them, and then the other team could take it. With trading, you can also work on something, another way to get around that. But again, we're focusing on financials primarily for right now. So, we probably don't want to give a 34-year-old pitcher a 5-year deal, but on the other hand, he's been pretty consistent. We looked at his stats. He's been very good. Maybe he's worth it. Probably not, but just for the sake of argument, let's not worry about it. In real life, there is no maximum number of years on a contract. You could find a baseball player who's 21, who's 15 years old. You can draft him, and immediately after you draft him and you pay his signing bonus, you say, we want to give you a 20-year contract for $1 million a year. There is not a baseball player alive today that would take a contract that stupid, but you could offer it. Obviously, it has to be at least a year. You can't offer monthly contracts in baseball because they have to be guaranteed. Everything is based on the major league year. Okay. All this stuff in the center here should be pretty self-explanatory. You can either type in the amount of money you want to offer. You can hit this to increase by $1 million, or this to decrease by $1 million. Use for all sets the same salary for all of the years. Let's talk about some of the other features of major league contracts. One of these is option years. In Major League Baseball, there are 3 kinds of options: team options, player options, and vesting options. Player options, the player gets the right at the end of the 2040 season, he will have a decision to make. And he can say, yes, I want to sign a new contract, or no, I don't, and he becomes a free agent. Player options are really good ways to give the player an out or get them to take a lesser salary. So if you're hurting for money, maybe you don't offer them a guaranteed year, you offer them a player option. If they want to work for that much money, they re-sign, everyone's happy. If they don't want to work for it, they get free agency, they make a lot more money. He's happy, maybe you're not so happy. That's a player option. Team options, and this is actually new. In previous versions of OOTP, you had to get a buyout for player options. Now it's only team options. Because it makes sense. A player option, they don't get a buyout. Team options, you do. A team option is the team's decision. The team decides whether they want to exercise the option. If they do not get, if the team says no, they pay him a buyout. Sometimes a buyout can be $0. I guarantee this guy won't take a $0 buyout, but maybe he will. But usually it's like a portion of the salary. So basically it tells the player, even if we decide not to re-sign you, we're going to pay you $2 million. And then he could still sign with somebody else. So again, team options give you control. Team options are really great in situations like our good friend Muddy here, where you have an older player and you're not sure how he's going to perform in the years to come. Team options are a great way around that. Real Major League Baseball is something called mutual options, which both the player and the team have to do before the option gets exercised. OOTP doesn't bother with that. I don't know why not. They're not very common in the majors anymore, so it's fine. The other is a vesting option. A vesting option automatically kicks in if a player reaches certain milestones. For relievers, it's games finished. It could be innings pitched. It could be games started. For hitters, It's usually based on plate appearances or at-bats or something else that escapes me at the moment. In real life, you can make a vesting option vest on whatever you want, but it has to be something clear, measurable, but there's sneaky roster stuff you can do to screw with a player to make sure he doesn't get a vesting option if it really bothers you. Teams will do this, and it's pretty underhanded, but they do it. And we'll talk about why a little bit later on when we get to arbitration. So those are the three options you can offer. One of the new features in 2018 is the player opt-out. The player opt-out is a player option, but it's in the middle of the contract. I'll show you an example. So, player plays 3 years. The player gets the choice to keep his existing contract or opt out. And if he opts out, if he takes the contract, he gets the last 2 deals. It's basically a player option, but it's more than 1 year at the back end. You can also offer 2 option years in any contract. Player opt-outs are a way to give your team some stability. So let's say you've got a great young player you want to sign him for 7 years. You give him that opt-out after year 4. If you do that, he gets more security. If he says, I'm doing awesome and I'm being underpaid, he opts out, he gets his big payday. But if he doesn't opt out, you're guaranteed to have him those extra years. Player opt-outs are very common in young players. Very common in Major League Baseball. Maybe not so much in OOTP. Player opt-outs typically are not a thing in OOTP. But in real life, they're very popular. That way you can sign like a player who's just entering his arbitration years and say, I want to give you a 6-year deal, but I'm going to give you an opt-out at the end of year 4 so that you can decide to leave if you think we're not treating you fairly. And just because they opt out doesn't mean they can't sign a new contract with you. It just means the old contract ends. A no trade clause. So in real life, those of you who follow Major League Baseball might know about the story of Giancarlo Stanton, who was just traded to the Yankees. Real Major League Baseball has 3 different kinds of no trade clauses, only 2 of which appear in OOTP. The limited no trade clause does not appear in OOTP at this time. A limited no trade clause basically says, okay, I don't want to go to teams X, Y, and Z. You negotiate it as part of the contract, and then you cannot trade that player unless he changes his mind. The player can always change his mind about a no-trade clause. That's what Giancarlo Stanton did. Stanton wanted to be traded from Miami. He had a no-trade clause in his contract, and he said, I will waive my clause if you trade me to one of these teams. Otherwise, I say no. So no-trade clauses can be very powerful because they give the player a lot more leverage about where he eventually ends up. It means you can usually give him less money. There's always a trade-off with something like that. The other trade clause that's automatic is called the 10-5 clause. If a player plays for 10 years in the majors and 5 consecutive years with the same team, the 5 years has to be consecutive. I don't believe the 10 years has to be, but the 5 years does have to be consecutive. That player gets an automatic no-trade clause. Automatic. And he can choose to waive it or not, but it's guaranteed. It's part of his contract. There's no way around it. It's part of the Major League CBA, the collective bargaining agreement. You can also add a promised role. And again, the no-trade clause and the promised role are a way for you to get the same player for less money. That's essentially what they're for. Maybe if I said you get to be the closer guaranteed, he'll take a little bit less money. I almost never promise roles. For position players, you can promise starter. You can promise middle of the lineup. We'll take a look at a hitter here in a second so we can just confirm these other things here. And finally, incentives. There is literally limitless incentive possibilities in a major league contract as long as you pay the person the guaranteed base level salary. Rookies are guaranteed a minimum. Veterans are guaranteed a minimum, and the longer you stay in the league, the more the veteran minimum increases. You can never go below that guaranteed salary, no matter how many incentives you give somebody. Even if the player wants to sign for less than the minimum, unless he asks the MLBPA, the Major League Baseball Players Association, for permission, they're going to say no. Because it looks bad for the rest of their clients if players want to play for free. And players have actually asked to do that in the past, and the MLBPA is like, no, you can't play for free. It makes everyone else look bad. Major League OOTP 18 only offers certain incentives. In this case, for pitchers, minimum innings. You pitch X innings, you get a bonus. You win the Cy Young Award, you get a bonus. You win an All-Star Award, you get a bonus. Very big pro tip when you're setting up your finances. You're going to want to set a screen that has vesting options and bonuses. You need this reminder so that you can adjust things accordingly. Definitely want this staring you in the face. Let's look at a position player just to show you how the contracts look a little bit different for position players. I think what we'll do is, for now, once we're done with that, we will conclude with arbitration. And then we'll save the other topics requested, the Rule 5 draft and free agency, for another episode. Just because I don't want to give you guys too much information in one episode. Maybe we'll do 3 more. Maybe we don't even do another full week of the tutorials. These seem to be really popular. People seem to enjoy them and get a lot out of them, so I'm totally fine with doing another week. And good news is I already have a week recorded, so I can just... It saves me time next week. So, what we're talking about. Salaries. Let's look at Kevin Harris. I don't actually want to re-sign Kevin Harris, but let's just look through the differences here. You cannot include an opt-out or an option if the contract is less than 1 year long. Otherwise, 2 years is sufficient. So promised role, starting lineup, your only option. Vesting option is, I believe, based solely on plate appearances. Or you could do games played. And then they get plate appearance bonuses, MVP, and All-Star. So basically the same contract. Again, make sure you check your age. Make sure you check the player's history. Make sure you decide if you think he's a good risk. Kevin Harris is not a good risk. He's just not. He hasn't been a good player since 2033. He's been average or bad. I would not sign him to a new deal, even if it is only for 1 year. He's just not worth it. Right. Let's close out today by talking about one of the more difficult things about... Actually, this is a great... We can do this on the screen, too. It's a perfect illustration. One of the most challenging things for people new to the game of baseball is arbitration. The NFL doesn't have it. The NHL does. I don't know if the NBA has arbitration or not. But see, again, in the NFL, contracts are non-guaranteed. So arbitration wouldn't matter to them anyway. When you sign a Major League Baseball player, you sign them to a rookie contract, which usually includes a signing bonus. But beyond that is usually for the Major League minimum. When you sign... Okay, actually in reality, when you sign a player to a real Major League contract, they get a signing bonus, and then they get a flat yearly salary. And that's all they're guaranteed. It's usually quite low, because they're going to be expected to be a minor league baseball player. In the past, they used to get Major League contracts right out the door, and that was a really bad idea. But for everyone else, it's okay. So, the moment a player hits the major leagues, we talk about something called service time. You cannot understand arbitration without understanding service time. A season in Major League Baseball is 148 days of service. But of Indian, you question me. Isn't a Major League Baseball season 162 games? It is. As long as you play X number of games, you're guaranteed. But I shouldn't say play games. Service is based on days on the 25-man roster. Is based on days on the 25-man roster, or the 15-day DL. If someone is on the 40-man roster, they do not collect service time. they have to be on the 25-man Major League roster. Not the 40-man, the 25-man. So if we take a look at our 40-man roster here, let's find Juan Gaitan. Juan Gaitan has no Major League service time. But that doesn't affect his minimum salary, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. I just wanted to show you an example. He has no Major League service time. He's not acquiring any. Professional service time, which is any service time anywhere in baseball, matters too. At 6 years, a player is granted free agency. At 3 or 4 years, they're granted Rule 5 eligibility, but only if they're not on a 40-man roster. And Rule 5 rules are super arcane, and that's why we're going to save them for another episode. We're not going to talk about Rule 5 years right now, but it is part of Major League service. Every Major League Baseball player gets the first 3 years of his Major League service are at the minimum salary or whatever salary the team chooses to give him. If you sign a player for a 1-year contract and they are not eligible for arbitration, that 1-year contract will get renewed for the first 3 years. There is an exception. And again, when I say years, I mean service years. I do not mean calendar years. I mean service years. And that's very important too. Right. What was I talking about? I talked about service years. And I said calendar years are not the same thing. Super 2s. Super 2s were only very recently added to baseball. Arbitration's a little bit older. Arbitration dates back to the 70s or 80s. Super 2 status is new. If a player places in the top X percent, and forgive me, I don't remember the number, it's either 15 or 16%, of either plate appearances or innings pitched in Major League Baseball for the first 2 years of their career, they are eligible to start arbitration a year early. You are guaranteed 6 service years, Major League service time, for every player you draft or sign, if it's an international amateur free agent. Your team has absolute control over that player for that 6-year period. And that's really important, obviously, because it will greatly affect how expensive players become. So either at the end of 3 years or 2 years if they're a Super 2. Do we have anyone here who's a Super 2? I love the financial screen in OOTP 18. They do such a good job giving you so much information on one screen. It's amazing. We're looking for a player with a star in their thing here. Here you go. This is an interesting thing. They just added players and minors on league minimum deals are only paid 16.5% of their salary when the majors, where on the minors. So even though this guy makes $535,000, in reality he's only getting paid 16% of that. This just counts against our budget this way. OOTP 18 does the math for you in one important way. If a player's on a Major League contract and they're not on a 40-man roster, they make $0. In real life, they still get paid a salary. Even a single-A player makes probably like $30,000 a year. Not a lot of money in the United States, but given the potential rewards, it could be super lucrative. Major League minimum is $535,000. Once you're on a Major League roster, even if you're only there for 1 day, you get that salary for the rest of the year. And then again, if you're sent down to the minors, you get a smaller percentage of it. But if you're on a Major League roster, you get this guaranteed. Older players that have exceeded a certain service time threshold get the veteran minimum, which is a little bit higher. Okay. Arbitration. So either after 2 years or 3 years, and I apologize, we don't have any Super 2s on this team. At the end of the year, you go through arbitration. What happens is the team picks like a lawyer or the GM or someone on the team, goes before an arbitrator, and the player's agent goes before an arbitrator, and they both make a case. This is how it works in real life. OOTP is obviously highly extracted. I'd love to see them do a little more role play with how this works in the game. It'd be a cool addition for 19 and years to come. Player sits down. He says, player's agent usually, sometimes it's the player self, usually the agent says, my player hit 50 home runs this year. He deserves a $5 million salary for next year. The team says he had 50 home runs, but he made 100 errors. And I'm just making these numbers up. I'm pulling them out of my butt. 100 errors. He should only be paid $3 million. Both teams submit a proposal in advance. The arbitrator in real life listens to arguments and then decides either in favor of the player or in favor of the team. In other sports like hockey, the arbitrator can pick any number between the two if they think that's fair. In baseball, it's got to be one or the other. Oh, hang on, is Elizondo a Super 2? Usually the pound sign means Super 2. What does a pound sign mean? Oh, it means he's FA eligible. Okay. Here we go. A star. This means possibly arbitration eligible. This is a potential Super 2. Here's an example right here. Billy Scott. A star. We do have a guy here. Because he pitched 100 innings in 2035, who's in the top 15% of all Major League Baseball players in terms of innings pitched, if he matches that in year 2, he gets arbitration after year 2 instead of after year 3. Okay. So, team sits down. Player sits down. They make their case. Arbitrator says, you get this figure. It's a guaranteed 1-year contract. You have to sign it. You cannot choose not to sign the contract. A team can do what's called non-tender a contract, which says, we want to make you a free agent. We don't want to sign you next year. We think you'll make too much money arbitration, or we just don't like you. You ran over the owner's dog when you backed out of the driveway, whatever. For whatever reason, we don't want you next year. We're non-tendering the contract. In that case, the player becomes a free agent. There is no arbitration process. That's one way out. The other possibility, way to avoid arbitration, because arbitration gets very expensive. Look at some of these estimates here. Where's like a really good player? And we don't have like amazing players here. But you can see them spike very quickly. Like we think Kevin Jenks is going to want $2.4 million in 3 years. If a player's super expensive, here's a great example. Look at Chris North. $535K, $4 million in arbitration, $8 million after 2 more seasons. That's huge. So what you do, and this is a very good strategy, both in real life and in OOTP 18, you talk to the player and you say, I want to buy your arbitration years, meaning I want to give you a guaranteed contract. We're going to skip the arbitration process altogether. I'm going to hand you a contract that says I'm going to pay you X million each year, a standard Major League contract with all the bells and whistles, your incentives, what have you. And you can negotiate on this. If the player agrees, he forfeits his right to arbitration for all the years that cover the contract. So every team is guaranteed 6 service seasons of their player, either through arbitration or what have you. So if the player plays first 2 years, look like he's going to hit Super 2. You sign a 3-year deal. That 6th year is still covered by arbitration. A player's always going to get either 3 or 4 years of arbitration, and there's no way they can get around that unless you sign a contract for longer than that or the exact amount. So I could talk to Ben Franzo right now. I think Ben Franzo's a super cool dude. And he's super pissed at us for some reason, so he doesn't actually want to talk to us. Bad example. Rodolfo Flores, maybe. Here we go. I can offer him, so I look at his major service. He's a possible Super 2, so I'm going to offer him a 4-year deal. See if he'll take it. He probably won't, because the younger players always want a shorter contract because they want those arbitration years. Because you can get some pretty dramatic spikes. But the real-life Indians did this a lot, and it worked really, really well for them. It just matters that you negotiate with the really great people before the arbitration gets silly. I mean, they've awarded players like $15 million in arbitration. for 1 year. And if that's what the arbitrator says, the team has to pay, or they have to cut him and pay him anyway. So that's how arbitration works. Again, remember, it's super important you don't confuse years in the league with years of service time. If a player's on the 60-day DL or he's not on the 40-man roster, he does not acquire service time. This is another way that teams can be kind of mean and dick you out of money. Because let's say you've got a really awesome player and he gets hurt and it's like a sprained ankle. The team can put you on the 60-day DL. That's the team's decision. Now, the player's agent's going to be pissed because they're going to figure out what the team's doing. The team is saying, oh, we think we don't want you to get hurt. In reality, they're trying to deny you service time, which means it takes you longer to get an arbitration, which means you make less money. It's super shady. And they're going to be pissed. I mean, you will run into cases where this has happened in Major League history. I don't think OOTP models it, but in the real majors, it's definitely happened. And the player says, no, I don't want to play for you anymore. I'm going to make a big stink. I'm going to take my case to the press. I'm going to sue you. It's legal and you can do it. But usually if you have to do something like that, usually maybe throw a little cash the player's way. Maybe you say, I'll cut you a check for $100,000 if you don't make a big stink about this. And maybe you say, okay, maybe you don't. The team can do it anyway. This is just a team trying not to piss you off because that'll bite him in the ass later down the road. And that's arbitration. Arbitration is much less complicated than people make it think. It all comes around service years, which I believe is 142 days, might be 148. It's not the full 162. Also, playoffs don't count as service time. Players still get paid for the playoffs, but they get paid differently, which I don't believe OOTP simulates. For the playoffs, players typically get, there's usually a playoff bonus written into their contract, and they usually get a percentage of the gate. Like what'll happen is the home team will get 55% of the gate, the visiting team gets 45%, and then they divide it among the team as like another playoff bonus. And the bonus pool gets bigger and bigger because more people want to watch it. And there's like TV networks that throw some money into the playoff bonus pool to make the players happy. OTP doesn't do that. But technically, if a player's in the playoffs, he's actually playing for free because he doesn't get guaranteed salary because it's not part of the Major League season. It's outside the Major League season. But the vast majority of players are going to get some... The vast majority of players still get paid. They just don't get the guaranteed amount. And it can be really good. It can be really stupidly good. If it's like... If the Yankees are in the World Series, the players are going to get a crap ton of cash for that. They're going to make, like... They could make like just pull a number out of my butt, but I'm sure it's about... They could make like $100,000 in a night. That's awesome. So don't weep for these players. If they make the playoffs, they are getting paid. Also, it helps them down the road, too. If I can say my client was on a playoff team, that looks better in free agency negotiations. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. It seems to me like I've talked a little bit long. Maybe I haven't talked as long as I thought I have. But I just wanted to make sure I took these building block issues, the draft, and... Oh, I forgot something about the draft. I didn't talk about signing bonuses, did I? So we're going to finish the draft. We're just going to say finish the draft, just so I can show you how signing bonuses work in the draft. And the game drafts. Plus, this way I can just sim forward and you don't have to sit through a bunch of boring crap. Okay. Every slot in the draft for the first 5 rounds is assigned a slot bonus. This is supposed to be the maximum amount you're supposed to sign a player for. In reality, it can't be enforced. This is their recommendation. And Major League Baseball will get angry with you if you spend more than the slot bonus, but they can't stop you from doing it. In the real majors, they can. Because in the real majors, you get a bonus signing pool for X rounds. But that hasn't been implemented in OTP 19 yet. Only in... Or 18 yet, excuse me. Maybe in 19. So you can always offer a player the slot. You can always offer a player less than the slot. And that's entirely the player's call. Look at Mike Cumby. This guy's excited to be playing Major League Baseball. Signability is stupid. Ignore signability. Signability is how quickly the player gets pissed off if you lowball him. He wants 10% of the slot. This is a no-brainer. You make the $105,000 deal. You make it. See, he's kind of ornery. He's like, I have a demand, and it's much, much less than the slot bonus. That can mean one of two things. One, it means the player is really, really bad. Or two, the player is really, really nice. And it's hard to say. But this is a no-brainer. There is no reason I would not make this offer. I would just say, submit offer. With Kevin Moran, he's got easy signability. And signability has lots of different things. Meaning, I can probably lowball him a bit. Like, so the draft is $2.5 million. I would actually offer him the slot to begin with. If he takes a slot, delightful. If he doesn't take the slot, oh well. You will notice, by the way, in the past, like when we played the St. Louis Brown season, you could offer a guaranteed Major League contract during the draft. You cannot do that anymore. All draft contracts are for a standard yearly amount that never changes. This is the signing bonus. Kevin Moran, if he accepts my deal, gets a check written to him for $2.57 million. If he never plays a day of Major League Baseball, that money is his. Now, there's lots of nasty stories about teams trying to get signing bonuses back, just because the player turns out to be like an axe murderer or something. Just something weird like that. Beyond the 5th round pick, there is no slot. Most teams pay their players no signing bonus or a very, very tiny signing bonus. And you can negotiate whatever you want. Like what'll happen is a player will go and say, you don't have to give me a signing bonus, but how about, like, oh my God, I'm the biggest fan of Corey Kluber in human history. Sign me a jersey and I will sign with your team. And that's a perfectly fine signing bonus because it's entirely between the player and the team. It could be literally anything. But if you're constantly signing players below slot, you might get dirty looks from other agents and things like that. But if the player says, the player says, I'll sign $20, that's great. You just save your team like a buttload of money. No Major League Baseball player is going to do that because the moment they're draft eligible, I mean, if there's even a chance they'll be drafted in, say, the first 10 rounds, they're going to have frickin' agents. And the agent's going to tell them, don't settle for less than this. And then again, it's a negotiation. So again, you're signing a contract that says you're going to be a minor league baseball player. I'm handing you this check. This is all you're guaranteed to get apart from your yearly salary in the minor league, which is likely to be crap. They make like 30, 40 grand. Which is, I mean, it's okay work if you can get it. But especially, I mean, 40 grand isn't a lot of money, especially if you got a wife and kids. Or I guess a husband and kids if you happen to be gay. That's not a lot of money. Especially if you're in a city like New York City. 40 grand might buy you a refrigerator box. It's not going to buy you an apartment. So this is why they negotiate for bonuses. So that was something I wanted to talk about. You do have a fixed amount of time, 30 days. If you cannot come to an agreement, the player goes back into the draft. This was a big stink a few years ago. A player named J.D. Drew actually would intentionally deny every bonus demand made to him, no matter how reasonable, because he wanted to be declared a free agent. And they said, that's not a rule anymore. You can't do that. Until you've graduated from college, and you have to have 1 or 2 years after your last collegiate or high school baseball game before you can be declared a free agent. Oh no, I'm sorry, that's not how free agency works. Every team has to pass on you. So, if any team drafts you for any reason, even if you don't sign the contract, the only thing you can do is go back into the draft the next year. So this is why teams will take what they call risks. They'll take a player who said, I'm going to LSU. I'm graduated from high school. I want to play college at LSU. I've signed a letter of intent. I'm packing my bags. I'm moving to Baton Rouge. The team says, fine, we're drafting you anyway. You don't have to sign, but this means you are my player. And even if you, up until the point where you refuse, up to the point where you don't sign the contract. But most importantly, it means you don't get to say, I'm a free agent. I can sign anywhere now. No. You have to wait until the next draft. And only if everyone in the entire draft passes on you do you get to be a free agent. Or if you're not eligible for the draft for various reasons. You have to have gone to high school in the United States, Canada, Puerto Rico, which is the United States, obviously. I think there might be one more country. Definitely, if you went to high school or college in the U.S. or Canada, you're draft eligible. You're not eligible to be a free agent. Some team can pick up your draft pick. So one cool thing you can do in OOTP is if you know you can't sign a player, you can shortlist him, and then when he comes back for the draft later on, you can maybe think about it. At the 7th round, I would definitely sign this guy if we can afford him. So if you get a player with impossible salary, the demands always say question mark. This is the starting point. He says, I want $3.2 million. If you offer me a penny less, I'll tell you to go to hell. And usually it's more. It used to be in the past, this was a sneaky way to find out exactly how much money they wanted. But the point is you're not supposed to know. This is, you have to pay money to take the risk. Obviously, if they refuse on the contract, you pay nothing. They have to sign on the dotted line before you hand them the cash. Make sense? I hope so. So I hope you found this. Episode enlightening. We talked about financials. We talked about the draft. Next tutorial episode, we're going to cover the Rule 5 draft, how off seasons work, and we'll just actually start with the off season next time because I think you'll find that very helpful. I also plan on doing a video on... Kevin Munoz wrote in and said, I have some problems determining, who's a good player, who's not a good player. Maybe it was head opener. I don't remember. I apologize. Please post your name in the comments if you said it, and I will give you the appropriate credit when I do record that video. What was I going to say? Yeah, okay. They're like, how do you know if a player's good? How do you know what context matters? What happens if you don't know the name of the player? I definitely want to cover that in a full half-hour video because there's lots of elements in that I want to talk about. Let's talk about historical players at that time because it's a really cool feature of OOTP. You can add a historical player anytime you want, but you need to make sure that you understand what a player means within a given context, and I'll talk about that in the 3rd episode. So it'll be a video after this one, a video on Thursday, the tutorial, and maybe a video on Friday. I'm not recording these in advance. I'm gonna post the videos on the day they're due, so that you have a chance to read it, ask questions, or watch it, ask questions, and then make suggestions. Because I'm perfectly fine to keep doing these tutorial videos if people find them helpful. And then we can always just come back to the St. Louis Browns. I've got the videos recorded. I can upload them whenever. So that'll be it for now. I hope you found the video helpful. If you have, like, subscribe, comment down below. Let me know if you have questions, concerns, things you'd like to see in the future. And until then, this has been Indian, and I bid you good day.